Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CA Ultra. I am your host, Spencer, and with me, as always, is Christopher Calls.
Hey there, how's it going?
Chris, it's going good. It's going good. Obviously, we don't have a match coming up this week for the Toronto Ultra, so we're going to save our preview video for sometime later next week. But in the meantime, there's some pretty big stuff in the Call of Duty sort of, news and community. The first of which being the MP5 NERFs. So we're going to discuss a little bit how we think that might impact the meta. But most importantly, we're going to give our starting five for the Toronto Ultra because that seems to be a talking point amongst a lot of people in this community. And I thought it would be a fun little video to sort of stir up some discussion because, like I said, we're a little new to this community, so I want to hear what other people have to say. Like, we have our opinions, but I'm really curious to see what you guys think. So let us know what your starting five would be if you agree with us and whatnot in the comment section below, and we'll be sure to respond. So with that out of the way, Chris, let's just talk about the MP5 NERFs real quick because I know that this podcast isn't going to be breaking down the damage range or like time to kill. You know what I mean? Like there's some really good channels out there like Exclusive Ace and people like that who like specialize in those sort of things. So I'm kind of going off of the stuff that I watch from them. But it seems that we might see the end of the 4 MP5 meta. Now, maybe not the 4 SMG meta, but it might be the end of the 4 MP5 meta. So what are your sort of initial thoughts and maybe some of the guns that you think might take over?
Well, so basically what's been the talk of the town is either a shift to a more of an AR meta or MP7s instead of AR. Now, for me, that means one of two things. So if we're going to go to a more of a AR meta, my guess is it's going to slow down the game because ARs, you want to hold longer sight lines. Like ARs are better at long, slow play because you don't want to get necessarily up and close because that's not where they're best at. If you're getting up and close, you're going to be using a sub. So if we're going to go to an AR meta, then I think
I see the pun.
If we're going to go to an AR meta, then we're going to be looking at having a slower game. Whereas if we stay with an MP7 and we have more individuals playing on MP7, we can expect the game to stay at what I think is the same pace as that right now.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of what I kind of want, I would want it to stay at the same fast pace. Mm-hmm. This is kind of why I like watching Call of Duty, is it's fast and it's heart wrenching, it's heart pounding.
Yeah.
So I would like it to stay in more of a sub meta where we can see that fast pace. And what that means for Toronto, in my opinion, would be that not a lot will change in the lineup. Now, if it changes to an AR meta, things might change in the lineup in terms of having a different player on who can play AR.
Yeah.
Like Brack.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts on that, Spencer?
So I think that we still, and we'll get to the starting five in a bit, I think that we still might see a change in the lineup, but not to the degree, like, I don't think we're going to see, you're right, like Mayhem all of a sudden enter the starting lineup or Brack. I think it's going to be the typical subs that we've been seemingly rotating out between like Classic, Bance, MettalZ, Cammy, Kleenex, right? So I could see it still being a 1AR4 SMG. The MP7's a good one. I know a lot of people were talking about the Uzi as well. I think the issue with the Uzi was it was extremely strong, and then now there's some confusion over whether or not there's a gentleman's agreement around the ammo that can be used. So, I mean, again, that's where it comes to Call of Duty stuff that, like, I don't fully I know what a gentleman's agreement is, but I remember I watched one thing where they're like, the .45 round, whatever it's called, I forget what it is, has been banned, and that means that the Uzi is extremely less viable than it previously was. So you might see that MP7 come into play, although I'm not sure if you're going to see the Uzi regardless. So I could see it being like an Uzi / MP7 meta. And again, you're right, 1AR for SMGs. If it does go to that AR, personally, I kind of want to actually see it, maybe selfishly for Toronto, because, again, when we entered this sort of scene and started talking about the Toronto Ultra and started like trying to learn about their players and their starting five, I remember at the very beginning of the year, a lot of people were sort of like, hey, this team can be pretty good, but it's only going to go as far as Brack can take them. And so when we first were going to do our little like intro roster preview video, which never was made because, to be honest, I didn't know any of the players outside of Brack and MettalZ, I think were the only ones I've heard of. It was sort of surprising to me that Brack hasn't even seen playtime, right? Like I was going to hype this guy up as him being a potential superstar player, and then we haven't seen him all year. So I understand that part of the reason is because he is sort of that like flex AR role. So
Yeah.
if it was a 2 AR meta, I would be really interested to see how him and Methods could play off one another. And then again, if you go all of a sudden Brax in the lineup and you run like a 3 SMG of like Classic, Kleenex, and Cammy, and then you have Cammy's potential swap to the Sniper on S&D, like I think that's going to be really, really interesting for this team. Otherwise, I agree. I think things will stay mostly the same with maybe a roster tweak here and there between Classic, Bance, or MettalZ.
Ooh, and that I think brings us quite cleanly to our starting 5.
Exactly.
So Spencer, you're on a roll right now.
Yeah.
Who is your starting 5?
So I think for me, if it's a double AR meta, and I'm not saying it is, I don't think it will be. I think subs are still really strong. But if it is a double AR meta, I would still go with Methods, Brack, and then I go Classic, Kleenex, and Cammy. Like I think that's I think that's actually a pretty good starting 5. And we've still seen some teams run double ARs here and there and have like some pretty good success with them. So some really good success with them. So I'm actually curious to see if that's something that maybe Toronto has in their back pocket. Although I don't think it's going to be something we see this specific tournament. That might be something we experiment with over the next break between our Toronto homestand and the most recent one. But if it's a 1 AR 4 sub meta, I'm going to go with the starting 5 of being what I would like to see is Methods, Kleenex, Cammy, Classic, and I'm going to say Bance. Even though I think there's a pretty decent argument that you sub out Bance for MettalZ. I know MettalZ had a rough performance in Paris, but MettalZ is a really, really good S&D player. So I do understand the value of having MettalZ has been our best S&D player all year. Like he's been extremely good on S&D. So I don't mind having somebody like that, especially when you have a guy like Kleenex, who seems to be like not a hardpoint specialist, but he's like his hardpoint stats are insane. Like he's been really good on the hardpoint when we saw him in Paris. Ideally, you assume he's just going to improve. He's a young kid. As he gets more in tune with this roster, more used to their sort of comms, that he will also improve. And if he can keep improving, I like the idea of having a MettalZ there for S&D, but right now I'm okay with keeping it Bance, Classic, Methods, Kleenex, and Classic.
Say Classic twice. Cammy, you mean?
Cammy. Thank you.
Yes. So when it comes to if we're doing like a 2 AR 3 sub type of thing, I'll be looking at Methods. Either I was either sub out like Bance, or for me it was Bance or Cammy. Sub those two out, one of those two.
Interesting.
For me it was MettalZ, Brack, Kleenex. I gotta count these. I'm like bad at counting almost.
Yeah.
Classic, and I would say for me it's probably Bance instead of Cammy. It's hard to say
about Cammy.
Yeah, it's hard. Like
over MettalZ and Bance, you're gonna take out Cammy.
Okay, I'm like open for either Cammy or Bance, but I think our contention right now is what about MettalZ for the AR.
But I definitely don't have Cammy out. Like I could see subbing MettalZ in. Sorry, I'll let you finish. But I could see subbing MettalZ in. I would just remove Bance then. I wouldn't take out Cammy. But you continue your. You let me finish. I'll let you finish.
Maybe Bance is the way to go. But I think for the 4 sub, the only thing that I would change is I would want to put Classic back in for Bance or Cammy. So
not MettalZ, okay.
And probably leave out Bance. If we're gonna like talk about that. But for me, I'm keeping MettalZ in on both sides, and I want to sub out Bance or Cammy because I feel like they've been performing for me at a higher at a worse level than Classics, and I think that there's a lot of recency bias, but with Classics not performing in Minnesota and then being kicked and not also being able to train the week before.
We've talked about that, yeah.
Well, which we've already talked about. I just think that he deserves another chance.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I'm totally on board with seeing Classic in. Like I think when he was initially when Kleenex first replaced him, I was sort of like, hey, chill. Like let's see how Kleenex performs, right? I agreed. I think we were both in the same page that Classic wouldn't have been the one that I would have subbed out, right? Yes. Both of us sort of agreed that Bance, MettalZ, and Cammy were a little bit more inconsistent, and that I did like Classic in that role.
Yes.
But I really wanted to see a guy like Kleenex come in because I'd heard really good things about him, and for the most part, he impressed me. I actually think he's gonna be a really good player. I know we didn't knock on him a little bit. Like I thought he got like immediately like he was the second coming of Mac and Awakening, and I don't know if that's the case just yet. Like, I want to see a little bit more from him, but I love the way he plays. He plays super fast, creates a ton of space, and his hardpoint stats are fantastic. So I just want to see how Kleenex performed, and I was like, let's just give it a second for Classic, right? Like, let's just, like, everyone chill and see how this works out. So I agree that now that we've seen a Paris weekend where Kleenex performed really well, and then MettalZ had a really tough weekend, especially his hardpoint was really poor. And I understand that you're right. I don't want to just bench a guy because he has one bad tournament. That adds like too much pressure. Like, MettalZ has been pretty good all year. I thought up until that point he was one of our better players. Like, had the last weekend not happened, I think I would have agreed with you keeping him in. His Search and Destroy is still really good. But because he performed so poor on Paris, and because his stats have sort of been a little bit underwhelming on the hard point and domination, which I do think is something that we needed to improve. Personally, I think Cammy's been improving all year. I think Cammy's actually a good player. I like to see Cammy in this line. I think he's young too. He's got some potential. I would think that the argument is between MettalZ and Bance, but I think Bance just plays faster, man. You look at their engagements per 10 minutes. And I think MettalZ is our slowest player outside of Methods, but that's an AR thing, an SMG thing. That's not like a personnel versus personnel thing. So I would actually like to see this team play fast, especially around a guy like Kleenex who also really likes to play fast. So personally, I would take out MettalZ and put in Classic, even though I do agree MettalZ's S&D has been really good all year, and it's a big reason why our S&D record is as good as it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. For me, we just look at this a little bit differently.
Yeah.
I think for you, you're definitely looking at Paris, and I will admit that I think MettalZ hasn't been doing as good as he
had a rough tournament,
before. And we will point out that comparing his performance in Paris to his performance in Minnesota is disappointing, because he was looking at close to like he had a 3.1, was killing 3.1 people per minute on Minnesota, and then dropped down to like 2.7.
Yeah.
Big drop, one of the biggest drops. But for me it's trending, people trending. So what I looked at was and we'll put this on the screen, is was looking at kills per minute for each player and deaths per minute for each player that we got from the stats. And what I looked at is I was morely paying attention to when we started going online. So from Dallas onwards, so Dallas, Florida, Minnesota, and Paris. And for me, what I noticed was that MettalZ, although did quite poor in Dallas, has had the biggest upward trend out of pretty much all of the players. He went from in terms of kills per minute, he went for a 2.3 kills per minute all the way up to 3.1, just a massive jump, then down to 2.7, but still just a pretty big increase. And on deaths, he was going on a downward trend. So he started at close to 2.9, and then has been dropping to about 2.7, 2.6.
Yeah.
Now for me, obviously, like we're looking at these certain things, but my guess is that a trend is a trend. So like I'm hoping that he'll continue to get better from this point onwards, and maybe that will be the case. Maybe it won't. He did have a poor performance in Paris. Maybe that's because he had some sort of
really poor performance, though.
Yes,
it was a really
he had a poor performance. And I will point out that once again, he's
not
better
S&D,
in certain things. He's better in certain things than others. And I don't want to rely too heavily on stats. He did have the same amount, the most kills per minute on Paris as Kleenex. But don't want to put things too heavily on stats. But I think maybe he did poorly in Paris, possibly because Classic was out, and possibly there was some certain synergy they had where they worked off each other, and
maybe
that wasn't working as well with Kleenex.
Even with this, like all these stats, the problem is with Paris, man. Anything sort of, you said he had the most amount of kills, that has to be just from his Search and Destroy. Like his hard point and his domination were like really poor that weekend, and it was a big reason why we weren't able to get in that top four. Like I think had he, and to be fair, Bance I believe had a pretty poor S&D. It was funny. It was like Bance was performing well on the hard point Search and Destroy, and then MettalZ was non-existent, and then it goes to Search, and then Bance goes like 0-6. Like that was a big reason why we sort of weren't able to pull that weekend out. So I'm happy that. I think Classic is, because the rumor is, for those of you who don't know, the whole plan was to have this discussion before we knew the starting five, but the rumor, the juice according to CDL Intel currently, is that Classic is actually back in the starting lineup ahead of MettalZ. MettalZ has been the one who's benched. So that was my initial position before I even knew this. And I'm happy to sort of see it going that way, but I still think there's a debate to be had whether or not you take MettalZ or Bance out.
Yeah.
I like the way Cammy plays, and I think having that flexibility in the sniper for S&D is like too critical. Like, I don't think you can give that up. I believe Bracken snipes, so if you like subbed him in, then maybe you could lose the Cammy because of his potential to snipe on S&D, but I don't know if like Classic or MettalZ or CleanX can take that sniper. I don't think they can, right? So like I think you kind of need Cammy in that lineup if you do want to run the sniper on S&D.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think for me, I would maybe more confirm it as taking out Bance. When you mentioned that, like, okay, look at MettalZ's stats got propped up by S&D. It's weird to say because when we're talking about kills per minute, where the most kills happen, do they mostly happen like a slow S&D or domination or hardpoint?
There's a lot more time in domination though, right? Hardpoint. There's a lot more minutes in hardpoint than there is in S&D.
I guess. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. He maybe has been carrying on S&D.
It's also just engagements. He plays slower. Like his engagements consistent across all three are slower in relation to the other subs. Like I kind of want to see this team play fast. I think it's a way that like the league has been trending for a while, and that's what you've seen players like Mac and Awakening and obviously online Simp, one of the best, right? Like these really fast, cracked out sort of like SMG players. So I'm happy that Toronto's going in that direction with a CleanX, for instance, and I'm happy that ideally you bring Classic back in because he's not your fastest player. Like Bance plays a little bit faster, but he's just been consistent for the most part all year. He's had some ups and downs, but when he's on, like he can sort of like carry a map. We've seen him sort of carry a map before, and we definitely saw CleanX carry a map before against New York. So I'm sort of happy to have two players who can kind of take over a game and secure a victory. Whereas I know Bance and MettalZ have had their moments, but they've never really taken over a game the same way that we've seen Classics or Cammy before or CleanX
You're right.
before.
And I just also want to talk about methods really quickly. And you can tell me what you think about what the stats say, but there's talk that like obviously he's possibly more of a slower player.
Yeah.
And it seems like it kind of shows in the stats. Like he has
he's also an AR player, right? So the stats are going to show that he's a lot slower of a player. Like I would want to look at this like across, like maybe in our spare time we'll sit down, we'll do some digging between like ARs across the league because ARs player in generally they have higher KDs because they play a lot slower, right? They play a lot safer. So I'm gonna I also like methods. I think he's a really marketable player. I think he's a good AR. So I am down to just like sit back. Let's see how he performs this weekend. I don't think he's going anywhere for sure this upcoming weekend. Let's just see how he performs. I'm gonna look for some stuff, and we'll wait until we make a judgment on that because I think Methods has been like a consistent player all year.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't mentioning that he should be taken out. I was just being like, let's like after doing this, like looking at his stats, it was like, oh, this is like an interesting trend. Like he's very clearly got the least amount of deaths, and he doesn't have the least amount of kills per minute either. He's about middle of the pack for kills, so he seems like a very high value player. And I don't know if that's like you sit back and you wait for trades to happen, and then you get the kill on the trade.
Yeah, he's an AR player.
So I don't know if so it is kind of like that. So they're propped up a little bit in that way, but he's still definitely a marketable player, and we want him on the team.
I think he's good. So I mean, we'll keep watching, and obviously depends how his performance is at this weekend. Like that's going to be a big thing because at this point with champs coming up soon, like. And these new meta changes, Toronto really needs to have a good performance. Otherwise, we're going to be in the losers bracket, and that's not where you want to start CDL Champs. Because I think that it was someone made a tweet the other day. I'm sorry, I'm not giving them credit. They deserve it. But they took the win percentages, and they made it where I think it was all round 11s. If a team won a round 11, where their place would be, and Toronto would be like 5th place. Or like 4th place in the league or something. If we had won all of our map 11s instead of we're like 1-5, but if we had went 6-0, we would like currently be in 5th place. So it's like this team like
you should probably drop that source in the description.
Yeah. This team would be a potentially a really good team. And I think for the most part in Champs has the potential to be that underdog team that like can catch a lot of teams off guard. We've seen it all year with Atlanta FaZe, Chicago Huntsmen. So hey, if they get the starting 5 down, I'm super looking forward to the potential of this team. And I think Classic, alongside CleanX, is a really good addition. So I'm really excited for this next weekend. And I think the debate will still be MettalZ or Bance, but we'll see.
Yes.
If Bance pops off and has a good weekend, then he's probably solidified himself as that starting 5. If he has another really poor performance, then who knows what's going to happen. Or, now that we have a 2-week break, will there be a 2 AR meta? Stay tuned to find out.
We could throw it up.
Yeah. So with that out of the way, I mean, that's my 75. That's your 75. I'm good for today. Chris, any more closing thoughts from you?
No closing thoughts. Thank you for listening. If you like our content, feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified when we have videos come up. And
also let us know what your starting 5 would be in the comments below.
Yeah.
Like, do you disagree with what we're saying? Did we go too hard down the stats rabbit hole? Did we, is our Overwatch background showing? Please let us know what you guys think in the comment section below. As always, enjoy.